lamb, Section 1 of The Life of Abraham Lincoln, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Chufi Galeazzi. The Life of Abraham Lincoln, Volume 1, by Ida M. Tarbell. Chapter 1. The Origin of the Lincoln Family. The Lincolns in Kentucky. Birth of Abraham Lincoln. Between the years 1635 and 1645, there came to the town of Hingham, Massachusetts, from the west of England, 8 men named Lincoln. 3 of these, Samuel, Daniel, and Thomas, were brothers. Their relationship, if any, to the other Lincolns who came over from the same part of England at about the same time is not clear. 2 of these men, Daniel and Thomas, died without heirs, but Samuel left a large family, including 4 sons. Among the descendants of Samuel Lincoln's sons were many good citizens and prominent public officers. One was a member of the Boston Tea Party and served as a captain of artillery in the War of the Revolution. 3 served on the brig Hazard during the Revolution. Levi Lincoln, a great-great-grandson of Samuel, born in Hingham in 1749 and graduated from Harvard, was one of the Minutemen at Cambridge immediately after the Battle of Lexington, a delegate to the convention in Cambridge for framing a state constitution, and in 1781 was elected to the Continental Congress, but declined to serve. He was a member of the House of Representatives and of the Senate of Massachusetts, and was appointed Attorney General of the United States by Jefferson. For a few months preceding the arrival of Madison, he was Secretary of State, and in 1807 he was elected Lieutenant Governor of Massachusetts. In 1811 he was appointed Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court by President Madison, an office which he declined. From the close of the Revolutionary War, he was considered the head of the Massachusetts bar. His eldest son, Levi Lincoln, born in 1782, had also an honorable career. He was a Harvard graduate, became governor of the state of Massachusetts, and held other important public offices. He received the degree of LL.D. from both Williams College and Harvard College. Another son of Levi Lincoln, Enoch Lincoln, served in Congress from 1818 to 1826. He became governor of Maine in 1827, holding the position until his death in 1829. Enoch Lincoln was a writer of more than ordinary ability. The 4th son of Samuel Lincoln was called Mordecai. Mordecai was a rich blacksmith, as an ironworker was called in those days, and the proprietor of numerous ironworks, sawmills, and grist mills, which, with a goodly amount of money, he distributed at his death among his children and grandchildren. 2 of his children, Mordecai and Abraham, did not remain in Massachusetts, but removed to New Jersey, and thence to Pennsylvania, where both became rich, and dying left fine estates to their children. Their descendants in Pennsylvania have continued to this day to be well-to-do people, some of them having taken prominent positions in public affairs. Abraham Lincoln of Berks County, who was born in 1736 and died in 1806, filled many public offices, being a member of the General Assembly of Pennsylvania, of the State Convention of 1787, and of the State Constitutional Convention in 1790. One of the sons of this second Mordecai, John, received from his father 300 acres of land lying in the Jerseys. But evidently he did not care to cultivate his inheritance, for about 1758 he removed to Virginia. Virginia John, as this member of the family was called, had 5 sons, one of whom, Jacob, entered the Revolutionary Army and served as a lieutenant at Yorktown. The 3rd son was named Abraham, and to him his father conveyed, in 1773, a tract of 210 acres of land in what is now Rockingham County, Virginia. But though Abraham Lincoln prospered and added to these acres, he was not satisfied to remain many years in Virginia. It was not strange. The farm on which he lived lay close to the track of one of the earliest of those wonderful western migrations which, from time to time, have taken place in this country. Soon after John Lincoln came into Virginia, vague rumors began to be circulated there of a rich western land called Kentucky. These rumors rapidly developed into facts, as journeys were made into the new land by John Finley, Daniel Boone, and other adventure-loving men, and settlers began to move thither from Pennsylvania, Virginia, and North Carolina. There were but two roads by which Kentucky could be reached then: the National Highway from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, and thence by the Ohio, and the highway which ran from Philadelphia southwestward through the Virginia Valley to Cumberland Gap, and thence by a trail called the Wilderness Road, northwest to the Ohio at Louisville. The latter road was considered less dangerous and more practical than the former, and by it the greater part of the emigrants journeyed. Now, this road lay through Rockingham County. Abraham Lincoln was thus directly under the influence of a moving procession of restless seekers after new lands and unknown goods. The spell came upon him, and selling 240 acres of land in Rockingham County for £5,000 of the current money of Virginia, a sum worth at that time not more than £125 sterling, he joined a party of travelers to the wilderness. Returning a few months later, he moved his whole family, consisting of a wife and 5 children, into Kentucky. Abraham Lincoln was ambitious to become a landed proprietor in the new country, and he entered a generous amount of land: 400 acres on Long Run in Jefferson County, 800 acres on Green River near the Green River Lick, 500 acres in Campbell County. He settled near the first tract, where he undertook to clear a farm. It was a dangerous task, for the Indians were still troublesome, and the settlers, for protection, were forced to live in or near forts or stations. In 1784, when John Filson published his History of Kentucky, though there was a population of 30,000 in the territory, there were but 18 houses outside of the stations. Of these stations, or stockades, there were but 52. According to the tradition in the Lincoln family, Abraham Lincoln lived at Hughes Station on Floyd Creek in Jefferson County. All went well with him and his family until 1788. Then, one day, while he and his 3 sons were at work in their clearing, an unexpected Indian shot killed the father. His death was a terrible blow to the family. The large tracts of land which he had entered were still uncleared, and his personal property was necessarily small. The difficulty of reaching the country at that date, as well as its wild condition, made it impracticable for even a wealthy pioneer to own more stock or household furniture than was absolutely essential. Abraham Lincoln was probably as well provided with personal property as most of his neighbors. The inventory of his estate, now owned by R.T. Durrett, LL.D., of Louisville, Kentucky, was returned by the appraisers on March 10, 1789. It gives a clearer idea of the condition in which he left his wife and children than any description could do. 1 sorrel horse, 8 pounds, 1 black horse, 9 pounds 10 shillings, 1 red cow and calf, 4 pounds 10 shillings, 1 brindle cow and calf, 4 pounds 10 shillings, 1 red cow and calf, 5 pounds, 1 brindle bull yearling, 1 pound, 1 brindle heifer yearling, 1 pound, bar spear plow and tackling, 2 pounds 5 shillings, 3 weeding hoes, 7 pounds 6 shillings, flax wheel, 6 shillings, pair smoothing irons, 15 shillings, 1 dozen pewter plates, 1 pound 10 shillings, 2 pewter dishes, 17 shillings 6 pence, Dutch oven and cule weighing 15 pounds, 15 shillings, small iron kettle and cule weighing 12 pounds, 12 shillings, tool adze, 10 shillings, hand saw, 5 shillings, 1-inch auger, 6 shillings, 3/4 auger, 4 shillings 6 pence, half-inch auger, 3 shillings, drawing knife, 3 shillings, currying knife, 10 shillings, currier's knife and barking iron, 6 shillings, old smooth bar gun, 10 shillings, rifle gun, 55 shillings, rifle gun, 3 pounds 10 shillings, 3 pot trammels, 14 shillings, 1 feather bed and furniture, 5 pounds 10 shillings, ditto, 8 pounds 5 shillings, 1 bed and turkey feathers and furniture, £1 10 shillings. Steeking iron, 1 shilling 6 pence. Candlestick, 1 shilling 6 pence. 1 axe, 9 shillings. Total, £68 16 shillings 6 pence. Soon after the death of Abraham Lincoln, his widow moved from Jefferson County to Washington County. Here the eldest son, Mordecai, who inherited nearly all of the large estate, became a well-to-do and popular citizen. The deed book of Washington County contains a number of records of lands bought and sold by him. At one time he was sheriff of his county, and according to a tradition of his descendants, a member of the Kentucky legislature. His name is not to be found, however, in the fullest collection of journals of the Kentucky legislature which exists, that of Dr. R.T. Durrett of Louisville, Kentucky. Mordecai Lincoln is remembered especially for his sporting tastes, his bitter hatred of the Indians, and his ability as a storyteller. He remained in Kentucky until late in life, when he removed to Hancock County, Illinois. Of Josiah, the second son, we know very little more than the records show that he owned and sold land. He left Kentucky when a young man to settle on the Blue River in Harrison County, Indiana, and there he died. The 2 daughters married into well-known Kentucky families. The elder, Mary, marrying Ralph Croom. The younger, Nancy, William Broomfeld. The death of Abraham Lincoln was saddest for the youngest of the children, a lad of 10 years at the time, named Thomas, for it turned him adrift to become a wandering laboring boy before he had learned even to read. Thomas seems not to have inherited any of the father's estate, and from the first to have been obliged to shift for himself. For several years he supported himself by rough farm work of all kinds, learning in the meantime the trade of carpenter and cabinet maker. According to one of his acquaintances, Tom had the best set of tools in what was then and now Washington County, and was a good carpenter for those days, when a cabin was built mainly with the axe, and not a nail or bolt hinge in it, only leathers and pins to the door, and no glass. Although a skilled craftsman for his day, he never became a thrifty or ambitious man. He would work energetically enough when a job was brought to him, but he would never seek a job. But if Thomas Lincoln plied his trade spasmodically, he shared the pioneer's love for land, for when but 25 years old, and still without the responsibility of a family, he bought a farm in Hardin County, Kentucky. This fact is of importance, proving, as it does, that Thomas Lincoln was not the altogether shiftless man he has been pictured. Certainly he must have been above the grade of the ordinary country boy, to have had the energy and ambition to learn a trade and secure a farm through his own efforts by the time he was 25. He was illiterate, never doing more in the way of writing than to bunglingly write his own name. Nevertheless, he had the reputation in the country of being good-natured and obliging, and possessing what his neighbors called good, strong horse sense. Although he was a very quiet sort of a man, he was known to be determined in his opinions, and quite competent to defend his rights by force if they were too flagrantly violated. He was a moral man, and, in the crude way of the pioneer, religious. In 1806, Thomas Lincoln married. The early history of his wife, Nancy Hanks, has been until recently obscured by contradictory traditions. The compilation of the genealogy of the Hanks family in America, which has been completed by Mrs. Caroline Hanks Hitchcock, though not yet printed, has fortunately cleared up the mystery of her birth. According to the records which Mrs. Hitchcock has gathered, and a brief summary of which she has published in a valuable little volume called Nancy Hanks, the family to which Thomas Lincoln's wife belonged first came to this country in 1699 and settled in Plymouth, Massachusetts. This early settler, Benjamin Hanks, had 11 children, one of whom, William, went to Virginia, settling near the mouth of the Rappahannock River. William Hanks had 5 sons, 4 of whom, about the middle of the 18th century, moved to Amelia County, Virginia, where, according to old deeds unearthed by Mrs. Hitchcock, they owned nearly 1,000 acres of land. Joseph Hanks, the youngest of these sons, married Nancy Shipley. This Miss Shipley was a daughter of Robert and Rachel Shipley of Laurinburg County, Virginia, and a sister of Mary Shipley, who married Abraham Lincoln of Rockingham County, and who was the mother of Thomas Lincoln. About 1789, Joseph Hanks and a large number of his relatives in Amelia County moved into Kentucky, where he settled near what is now Elizabethtown. He remained here until his death in 1793. Joseph Hanks' will may still be seen in the county records of Bardstown. He leaves to each of his sons a horse, to each of his daughters a heifer yearling, though these bequests, as well as the whole estate of 150 acres of land, was to be the property of his wife during her life, when it was to be divided equally among all the children. Soon after Joseph Hanks' death, his wife died, and the family was scattered. The youngest of the 8 children, left fatherless and motherless by the death of Joseph Hanks and his wife, was a little girl called Nancy. She was but 9 years old at the time, and a home was found for her with her aunt, Lucy Shipley, wife of Richard Berry, who had a farm in Washington County near Springfield. Nancy had a large number of relatives near there, all of whom had come from Virginia with her father. The little girl grew up into a sweet-tempered and beautiful woman, whom tradition paints not only as the center of all the country merrymaking, but as a famous spinner and housewife. It was probably at the house of Richard Berry that Thomas Lincoln met Nancy Hanks, for he doubtless spent more or less time nearby with his oldest brother, Mordecai Lincoln, who was a resident of Washington County and a friend and neighbor of the Berrys. He may have seen her, too, at the home of her brother, Joseph Hanks, in Elizabethtown. This Joseph Hanks was a carpenter and had inherited the old home of the family, and it was with him that Thomas Lincoln learned his trade. At all events, the 2 cousins became engaged, and on June 10th, 1806, their marriage bond was issued according to the law of the time. 2 days later, according to the marriage returns of the Reverend Jesse Head, they were married, a fact duly attested also by the marriage certificate made out by the officiating minister. The marriage took place at the home of Richard Berry, near Beachland, in Washington County, Kentucky. It was celebrated in the boisterous style of 100 years ago, and was followed by an inn-fare given by the bride's guardian. To this celebration came all the neighbors, and according to an entertaining Kentucky centenarian, Dr. Christopher Columbus Graham, even those who happened in the neighborhood were made welcome. He tells how he heard of the wedding while out hunting for roots, and went just to get a good supper. "I saw Nancy Hanks Lincoln at her wedding," continues Mr. Graham, "a fresh-looking girl, I should say over 20. I was at the inn-fare, too, given by John H. Parrott, her guardian, and only girls with money had guardians appointed by the court. We had bear meat, venison, wild turkey and ducks, eggs, wild and tame, so common that you could buy them at 2 bits a bushel, maple sugar swung on a string to bite off for coffee or whiskey, syrup in big gourds, peach and honey, a sheep that the 2 families barbecued whole over coals of wood burned in a pit and covered with green boughs to keep the juice in, and a race for the whiskey bottle." After his marriage, Thomas Lincoln settled in Elizabethtown. His home was a log cabin, but at that date few people in the state had anything else. Kentucky had been in the Union only 14 years. When admitted, the few brick structures within its boundaries were easily counted, and there were only log schoolhouses and churches. 14 years had brought great improvements, but the majority of the population still lived in log cabins, so that the home of Thomas Lincoln was as good as most of his neighbors. Little is known of his position in Elizabethtown, though we have proof that he had credit in the community, for the descendants of 2 of the early storekeepers still remember seeing on their grandfathers' account books sundry items charged to T. Lincoln. Tools and groceries were the chief purchases he made, though on one of the ledgers a pair of silk suspenders worth $1.50 was entered. He not only enjoyed a certain credit with the people of Elizabethtown, he was sufficiently respected by the public authorities to be appointed in 1816 a road surveyor, or, as the office is known in some localities, supervisor. It was not, to be sure, a position of great importance, but it proved that he was considered fit to oversee a body of men at a task of considerable value to the community. Indeed, all of the documents mentioning Thomas Lincoln which have been discovered show him to have had a much better position in Hardin County than he has been credited with. It was at Elizabethtown that the first child of the Lincolns, a daughter, was born. Soon after this event, Thomas Lincoln decided to combine farming with his trade, and moved to the farm he had bought in 1803 on the Big South Fork of Nolan Creek, in Hardin County, now LaRue County, 3 miles from Hodgensville, and about 14 miles from Elizabethtown. Here he was living when, on February 12, 1809, his second child, a boy, was born. The little newcomer was called Abraham after his grandfather, a name which had persisted through many preceding generations in both the Lincoln and Hanks families. The home into which the child came was the ordinary one of the poorer Western pioneer, a one-roomed cabin with a huge outside chimney, a single window, and a rude door. The description of its squalor and wretchedness, which are so familiar, have been overdrawn. Dr. Graham, than whom there is no better authority on the life of that day, and who knew Thomas Lincoln well, declares energetically that it is all stuff about Tom Lincoln keeping his wife in an open shed in a winter. The Lincolns had a cow and calf, milk and butter, a good feather bed, for I have slept on it. They had home-woven kiverlids, big and little pots, a loom and wheel. Tom Lincoln was a man and took care of his wife. The Lincoln home was undoubtedly rude and in many ways uncomfortable, but it sheltered a happy family, and its poverty affected the new child but little. He grew to be robust and active, and soon learned how endless are the delights and interests the country offers to a child. He had several companions. There was his sister Nancy, or Sarah, both names are given her, 2 years his senior. There was a cousin of his mother's, 10 years older, Dennis Friend, commonly called Dennis Hanks, an active and ingenious leader in sports and mischief, and there were the neighbors' boys. One of the latter, Austin Gollaher, lived to be over 90 years of age, and to his death related with pride how he played with young Lincoln in the shavings of his father's carpenter's shop, hunted coons and ran the woods with him, and once even saved his life. "Yes," Mr. Gollaher was accustomed to say, "the story that I once saved Abraham Lincoln's life is true. He and I had been going to school together for a year or more, and had become greatly attached to each other. Then school disbanded on account of there being so few scholars, and we did not see each other much for a long while. One Sunday my mother visited the Lincolns, and I was taken along. Abe and I played around all day. Finally, we concluded to cross the creek to hunt for some partridges young Lincoln had seen the day before. The creek was swollen by a recent rain, and in crossing on the narrow footlog, Abe fell in. Neither of us could swim. I got a long pole and held it out to Abe, who grabbed it. Then I pulled him ashore. He was almost dead, and I was badly scared. I rolled and pounded him in good earnest. Then I got him by the arms and shook him, the water meanwhile pouring out of his mouth. By this means I succeeded in bringing him to, and he was soon all right. Then a new difficulty confronted us. If our mothers discovered our wet clothes, they would whip us. This we dreaded from experience, and determined to avoid. It was June, the sun was very warm, and we soon dried our clothing by spreading it on the rocks about us. We promised never to tell the story, and I never did until after Lincoln's tragic end. When the little boy was about 4 years old, the first real excitement of his life occurred. His father moved from the farm on Nolan Creek to another some 15 miles northeast on Knob Creek, and here the child began to go to school. At that day the schools in the West were usually accidental, depending upon the coming of some poor and ambitious young man who was willing to teach a few terms while he looked for an opening to something better. The terms were irregular, their length being decided by the time the settlers felt able to board the master and pay his small salary. The chief qualifications for a schoolmaster seem to have been enough strength to keep the big boys in order. though one high authority affirms that pluck went for a heap sight more in sinew with boys. Many of the itinerant masters were Catholics, strolling Irishmen from the colony in Tennessee, or French priests from Kaskaskia. Lincoln's first teacher, Zachariah Riney, was a Catholic. Of his second teacher, Caleb Hazel, we know even less than of Riney. Mr. Gollaher says that Abraham Lincoln, in those days when he was his schoolmate, was an unusually bright boy at school, and made splendid progress in his studies. Indeed, he learned faster than any of his schoolmates. Though so young, he studied very hard. He would get spicewood bushes, hack them up on a log, and burn them, 2 or 3 together, for the purpose of giving light by which he might pursue his studies. Probably the boy's mother had something to do with the spicewood illuminations. Tradition has it that Mrs. Lincoln took great pains to teach her children what she knew, and that at her knee they heard all the Bible lore, fairy tales, and country legends that she had been able to gather in her poor life. Besides the ABC schools, as Lincoln called them, the only other medium of education in the country districts of Kentucky in the Section